Hi, everyone. Welcome to Corporate Quitter. I'm super geeked about today's guest, and the timing is so perfect because if you guys have been listening to the news, TikTok is on the verge of being banned. And with people wanting to create a new lifestyle of being an influencer, a creator, or a form of a celebrity, I think Whitney, our guest on today, is perfect to talk about this and how a platform doesn't dictate whether you can be like famous or not, which is super cool. But her name is Whitney Uland. She's a celebrity life coach and course creator. In her signature mentorship program, The Self-Made Celebrity, she teaches clients around the world how to tap into their celebrity energy so that they can create the life and careers that they know they are meant for. And I think a lot of people in my audience are like, yes, that's me, even though they don't want to admit it. They're like, yes, that's me. I want that. So how did you get into like being a mentor in this way? Like, how did you help cultivate people into finding their celebrity energy? I know you obviously your background is you have acting, I think, directing background. So like, how did that all come to this?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. But yeah, I think like my background, it's so funny because it's one of those things where it's like I didn't see how all of the pieces came together in my life
Hmm.
until like a hindsight a little bit. But I think even just further back a step. So I was raised in the religion of Mormonism, which was very abusive to me. And it really, depending on the definition that you look at, there's a lot of mind control in that and a lot of
Hmm.
abuse. And it was really like, I don't think I realized it because I was born into it, but so that was kind of happening in the background, and I grew up knowing that I just, like I felt inside of me like I was meant to be famous. And at the time, I was a kid, we didn't have influencing or things like that, and
Hmm.
so what I saw was I was like, "Oh, like, acting, that's what, like, I'm gonna do, I guess." And so I pursued that, and I went to Brigham Young University, I studied musical theater, and I'm, a trained musical theater actress, singing, dancing, and acting, and then I moved to New York City, and I had all of the talent that my friends did, but I just, like, wasn't getting the roles, and I wasn't booking things, and I ended up kind of pivoting into more work on camera, and I really learned how to make a really magnetic tape, right? Like, so that like, an audition tape, right? So it was, like, a very and, like, even all of my acting, my mentors, things like that, everyone was like, "You, like, you're such a talented actress, like, you're so pretty, like, you have all of the pieces there," but I couldn't book anything, like, nothing was really, like, working for me, and then my dad passed away, and it just really took a toll on my mental health, and I got to a really dark place, and that's when I discovered life coaching. So, when I discovered it, it purely was a way of, self-healing, but what it ended up giving to me was not only this, like, confidence and being able to learn how to actually translate my, like, gift into being able to actually book work, but it
Hmm.
also because I had been raised in so much abuse and so much, like, mind control, it helped me to like, I figured out basically how to rewire my own brain and overcome and to heal. And what I realized through this whole process was that your healing and the work that you do on yourself is directly correlated to how magnetic you are and how
Yep.
much you have, like, the it factor. And so all of these things kind of coalesce together, and it was as I did this work, that's when I started, booking the jobs and landing with the agents and winning awards and being able to travel the world with my work and build my own audience and things like that. And so really that's kind of like, I guess, a little bit of my villain origin story, but it's like it's really pulling together what I learned as an actress from like how to be magnetic, how to like have that when you're on camera, but then also pairing that with the psychology, with, the evolutionary psychology, things like that to rewire your brain. So kind of a long-winded answer, but there's like all of the
No, but it's
pieces that kind
great.
of came together. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, like, I can't imagine, but I kind of can, the difficulty where you were in this Mormon sort of background, this family who expected this sort of lifestyle of you, or even your self-expression, right? Which is, I would think, a bit more muted or expected to be a
totally.
bit more muted. And here you are, this person who's just like lit up by energy, and you got this personality and all this wanting to share your light with the world. How difficult was it for you to go from that to then being like, no, 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 I'm going to actually pursue acting? Like, was it actually easy, or was there like riffraff in the family? Like, how? Because I know there's some people
Uh-huh.
too, even myself, who are like, you're not doing the traditional thing. Like, this is bad. And like, it dissuaded me from even pursuing it in the first place for a while.
Totally. No, I see that so much with my clients too. It's like obviously my mom is my only living parent. And even like my dad was it's like they both were supportive of me, but they also were just so afraid themselves. Like as their daughter,
Hmm.
they were like, I want you to be happy, but this scares me and seems like the unknown. And I don't really know. My dad he really like saw my talent, saw my drive, saw my passion. And he was like very encouraging of me. But I think it's still, I had this like back in the, and this is what I think a lot of us here is like back in your mind being like, oh, but celebrities are self-centered. Celebrities are full of
Yeah.
themselves, like, oh, it's like not only is it like an unstable career path, but it's like only like toxic people do it was kind of the messaging that I got growing up. And so, yeah, it was a bit of a departure, even though like my my mom now, like, she's like, "No, I love what you do. I think it's amazing." But I do think it's easier to support when you're kind of on the other side and like can show the success than when someone's
Oh,
first
for sure.
starting. But I also think, I see this a lot is like when I truly believe we all have this magnetism inside of us. And especially if
Mhm.
you're someone who has the desire to fame for fame, like I always believe, like I always tell my clients, it's like your desires are your dharma. If you know that you're meant to be famous, then like there is an audience for you. But what gets in the way is, our brains, right? When we
Mhm.
self-sabotage and all of this. But I think what ended up happening for me was that was just innately inside of me. And then kind of and it would shine even though people would try to dim it or I was trying to dim it or, I was afraid or whatever. But then it was almost like the Mormon church like kind of plucked me out and was like, ooh, we're going to use that gift she has and we're going to use it for our advantage. And so I really became like the poster child of Mormonism, like while I was at
Really?
BYU. Yeah. And they like
That's so,
kind of,
like you're like, "This
yeah,
is
they,
not what I intended, dude." Like, this is
right,
not how
right.
yeah.
No, not at
This is not
all.
my
And
calling.
so it was they were kind of like, oh, if you have this gift, then we're going to use it for our advantage. So I was kind of like paraded around at BYU. My ex-husband and I were kind of as this, like, we are the poster children. We were a part of this performing group and flown to Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, met with the ambassadors there. I've met the Prince of Denmark. Like they really like saw my light and were like, we're going to use it for our purposes. And it was really abusive and didn't have full consent. And of course, I was a kid, I was 18, whatever. But now I've kind of been on this mission of like, no, I'm using my voice for what's important to me and to reclaim that narrative and to use my light and my gift the way that I want to. And that's really like why I think I'm so passionate about what I do, but also because the artists, creators, and influencers that I work with, they all have these really important missions. They all have
Yep.
something on their heart, right? Whether it's, like you inspiring people to like find a different way of living or to just see the world in a different way. And so it's really like important that we learn how to use our voice for these like really important missions to make a difference and to like inspire people around the world.
I think you brought up a good point though, because even for myself, I found that I knew that there was this innate like lightness or like brightness within me that encouraged people to do things or inspired people or like I just knew that there was some sort of magnetism that I had. But the paradox of that is like the darkness is attracted to the light. So it's like, okay, I need to
Mhm.
now shield myself. And when you shield yourself, then you can't like project yourself out into the world. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword of like, okay, I need to like secure myself, but I also need to shine bright so like people can see me. So like I mean, even now when you think about celebrities, like we had talked about this when we had first connected, how the actual model, or I would just say like the fame game is completely changing. So whereby back then maybe it was more toxic and you had people who were maybe not using their fame for the best purposes, let's say. Now there's this more, I guess they're making space for people who have the best intentions, clear intentions, good intentions for the greater good of, let's say, the planet in like air quotation or their specific audience or whatever it is. And like, then that's great because you can share your light in that way. But it's still scary because once you're in that kind of world, you get also like again, you're now back into witnessing the darkness, and it can be a pretty scary place to be. But well, before we go down that rabbit hole, more of that down, through the conversation, I one of the things that I knew from a young age is like I had the personality and the it factor, and I know it seems like you did too. Is that something you have to be born with, right? Like Maybelline, she's born with it, or is it like something that you can actually be taught? And or is it, like you had said before, a bit of a rewiring of the brain and whatever it is that you had to go through healing to then uncover the it factor if you feel like you don't have access to it? Like, what is the secret sauce for the it factor?
I love that question. So yeah, like I think even like a lot of people would probably look at me and be like, "Oh, she's probably outgoing." I'm actually not really. That's not my natural state. What's really magnetic about people is authenticity. So in order to create fame which I say like that's fame is just a resource, it's just having people's attention. You really just have to trigger them, meaning you have to like show a divisiveness in their current way of thinking. So what this means is that a lot of, and how a lot of this works and kind of going into that like darker side, it's like people will use fear or manipulation tactics or things like that, and that will garner attention. But then there's
Yeah.
also like and I kind of say those are like the vampires, right? And then there's the people that are light. That really though, you don't actually have to be outgoing and bubbly as much as you have to just be authentic people. So this is something I learned as an actor is that as an actor, you never want to do a scene with a dog or a baby. The reason is not because they're like annoying, but because people cannot help but look at them. And so they do what's called like pull focus. And so it's like, and I even see this now with my baby and my dog. We can't go anywhere without people just being drawn to them. Like people will be like, they'll get on the elevator on their phone in a completely different world. And then they like notice my kid's energy and they're just like drawn to look at him. And like he's a cute kid, but it really is a lot more
He
about
really is a cute
that.
kid.
Yeah. But like it really is a lot more about like that magnetism. And so that really like the it factor is really more about being in a hyper present state where we're not encumbered by fear. So if you are someone who is shy or you're introverted, it's not about like putting anything on, but it's about trusting that it is safe for you to be seen in that natural state, in that flow state. But of course, our brains are going to want to avoid that because being perceived in that way is vulnerable and opens us up to fears. So I think that, I think that's a big misconception. And the work really is about creating safety in your brain, in your nervous system, in your body to just be perceived how you actually are. And that's what really makes people magnetic.
Yeah. And the other thing with authenticity that I have found in my journey, because I've been doing this for like 3, 4 years now, is because I've gone down the path of like, okay, let's go for the algorithm, right? What's going to hit the most? Okay, let's do the fear thing. And then I realized, wait, that's not great. And I feel like shit. So we're not going to do that. Switch over to light. How do we do this? And then all of a sudden, you might be authentic in expressing yourself, but that doesn't mean it necessarily is going viral per se, even though there are people leaning in. So, I mean, can you talk on a little bit about that? And maybe, okay, actually, I brought up before the aspect of the TikTok app possibly being banned in the US, which for me, that's where I started. I know a lot of other people, that's where they start. It's a great way to go viral. It's also a great way to just like practice harnessing and expressing like your authenticity without feeling like your friends, your family, your boyfriend, colleagues, like, no, because it is like a unique new platform where it's not really that easy to find your contacts or your friends. You can kind of like just talk to the world versus just talking to a select audience on, let's say, your Instagram page. But can you talk a little bit about that of like the chasing the algorithms and like does that actually like translate to your fame or like quality of fame or ability to pursue like what about that and social media?
Yeah. So that's such a good question. And I think like, and also if I go in a rabbit hole, pull me back in because I want to make sure I
Okay.
answer all
We
of
love
it. But
rabbit holes here though.
yeah. So I think the first thing I just want to say is like, fame is a resource. It's something that you create. And once you know how to do it, you can do it. You can leverage that anywhere. So even though like even right now, and I've told my clients this literally for years, I've been like, oh my God, I hate Instagram. It's so annoying. It's so boring. And yet the skill, like there is a little bit of nuance, right? There's a little bit of like when I type my captions, they actually need to be optimized in a slightly different way, but the content is actually the same on both of them. The difference is, and this is something I see in both camps. So typically what I see is that there's four main relationships that you have to work through in your interpersonal life in order to create the resource of fame. The reason behind this is because if you want to go viral, it does feel kind of like nebulous. Like it's a little bit like, what is like our brains can't really comprehend what 1 million followers actually
Yeah.
looks like, right? It's kind of like a confusing, vague thing. And so there's four relationships, but even though it's vague and confusing, there are real world ramifications and they impact your personal life. So they impact either and, right? All of these things could be possible. Your family, your friends and colleagues, your romantic partnerships, and the amount of money that you make. So the work a lot of the time comes back to addressing those fears. So something I see a lot, and you can tell me if this resonates with you, but this was definitely my experience. The reason I liked TikTok was because I didn't have a really strong, solid community in my actual personal life. Remember, I was raised
Hmm.
Mormon, so a lot of the people following me were from childhood. They were Mormon, and I honestly was afraid of showing up in that space in an authentic
Same.
way, right? Yeah.
Terrified. Like
Yeah.
literally I would try to bring like, you know how you can like save down the video without a watermark and put it on Instagram? Like
Uh-huh.
I would try to do that and then like be terrified and like delete it
Yes.
or like a boyfriend at the time would be like, this is ridiculous or this is stupid. And of course I'd be like,
Yep.
he's right and like take it down and then go back to
Yes.
like my little TikTok fam who
Yeah.
a lot of them became real world like best friends. Like people I like call up
Right?
on the phone weekly like to talk about like
Right.
yeah, anyway, keep going on
Yeah.
keep
No,
talking
that's
about your
this
experience.
is exactly it. And it's like, and that's the thing is like, so for me, and it sounds like for you, it felt safer on TikTok
It
because it
was
was
so
just
yes.
strangers. Right. And yet there are a
Which is
lot
funny
of
how that
people.
happens. Like, you're like, well, all
Right.
the people in my close world are supposed to be safer options to me, right?
Right.
Stranger danger, but it ended up being the opposite.
Right. And that's something though that so we'll see a lot when I'm coaching people. There are a lot of people who feel the opposite. So they have had and like all of this comes down to like the subconscious fears and your past experiences. So at the time it sounds like maybe, your partners or your friends or whatever, if they are, or like for me it was like they're Mormon, they're not going to agree with what I'm saying. So that
Mhm.
doesn't feel safe. Whereas I was like, well, I can talk to TikTok. That kind of feels like I'm just speaking into a void. And then I built a community and then I was like, oh, this is actually safe for me to do. And then as I worked through the blocks around my friends, around my family about being more public, like for a long time, the big reason I didn't go onto TikTok or onto Instagram was because my mom is still Mormon and I didn't want her to hear the things that I was saying about Mormonism. And so it wasn't until I cleared that shit up with her and I set boundaries and we had difficult conversations that then I was able to show up in that magnetism on Instagram. And now,
Mhm.
like in the last like 10 days, I've gained like 12,000 followers on Instagram. So
Hey.
it really is. And it's so funny because it's like nothing really changed other than my willingness to be authentic and to actually do the same thing. I'm also a believer that there are like energetically, I was not available to be perceived there. And then once I
Yes.
was, that's when
Yes,
the
yes,
followers
yes.
started to come, right?
It's so true. Like, I had to wait till I broke up with that boyfriend, like,
Yep.
got new friends, like, moved, like, literally moved locations to a new environment. Got like you said before, the healing thing. I feel like every time I go through another layer of healing, whatever modality it happens to be, or, you have those, like, earth-shaking moments of, like, a singular just a sentence you read in a book, and you're like, "Holy crap, that was the thing." Like,
That was the
then you're
thing.
like,
Yeah.
"Okay, now I've opened the void to welcome in another, I think it was in October or November. I had like maybe 1,200 no, like 2,000 followers on Instagram. Was pretty flat leveled for a while. And then the video popped off after a huge level of like going over the fear of being seen and like just saying like, fuck it, here we go. Let's just do this on Instagram, right? TikTok's different on Instagram. And now I think I'm up to like 6,500. So like similar in the sense of like, okay, we're like, there are pockets of when I'll pop when I hit those new levels of authenticity and expression. But it is totally a game, and it's definitely an
Yes.
energetic thing at this
And
point, and even if
and
it's
that
woo, I don't care. I'm like, "Here, I will do it all." Like, it's fine.
Totally. No, same. And I love, because I obviously was raised with a spiritual background. It's like that I do rely on that a lot. And I know that people kind of need sometimes the steps of like, okay, but how does this connect? So, but I think like it's exactly that. And that's why like I really like believe that creating fame is a spiritual journey and it is also kind of like a video game. Where it's like anytime you're feeling stuck, there is something subconsciously that needs healing. And once you
Oh,
heal
resistance for
that,
sure, of some
Right,
sort.
like, as soon as you heal that resistance, that's when things open up. So, yeah, I think, like, a lot or another comment that I get a lot is people are like, "I know how to have that magnetism, but I don't know how to do it online." Right? As soon as I turn on my
Yeah.
camera, that's when it shuts down. And a lot of the times, those are people that their fears have come from, like, strangers, right? Like, maybe something traumatic happened or what they learned about the world or whatever. Whereas to me, the world like the vastness seemed safe, maybe for you as well. So it's
Mhm.
kind of just like figuring out the nuance of like where is it that you feel unsafe being perceived, and then like overcoming that fear, and that's when like energetically it opens up.
Yeah, and I also think energetically in the world too, you'll find your space to take up space with said avenue or thing you're talking about, whatever it is. Like, if I did what I did, which was talking about quitting corporate, even 6 months later than when I started, I never would have hit the timing of the Great Resignation, which popped everything off. And same with a friend of mine who does she does salary transparency and like there are all these things that energetically align to make it so that you can pop off or say or talk about certain things at certain times. And I think that's also something that you and I mentioned about how there's a difference between fame being like harnessing the resource of fame and being a celebrity and the
Yeah.
difference of like what used to be, which was the showstopper energy versus authenticity. So like there are things that are moving behind the scenes that we as individuals who maybe aren't, well, you probably are more in the Hollywood system than I am, but we all are seeing a lot of things changing. So it's making space for more of these authentic creatures versus just the showstoppers. But like, what is the difference between the celebrity and the like fame as a reason? Like, is there a clear indicator of the difference, or it's just authenticity?
Yeah. So, what I would, I guess, something I also just think is helpful for context is that if we look at like who used to be a celebrity and we look at that big Hollywood machine, it was the people in power were then selecting who was going to be the face, right?
Mhm.
So if you think about like the people who are like in corporate, they're the ones that have the casting directors that are taking in the meetings, that are being introduced to the Nepo babies or whatever. They could kind of sell those people who a lot of the time were people with a lot of privilege, like, right? Like it's a lot of the time this like old white men that are making these decisions that also, if we look at their business model, is that they need to sell dollars, right? They
Yep.
need to sell ad space. That's actually how television is funded, is by the ads. And so they literally needed to pick the person who would be like the least almost threatening to their bottom line, right? And so a lot of the times they were picking people that they just were like, oh, this person, and a lot of the time, I think that's also why we see the people in Hollywood have like major sex appeal, is because sex
Mhm.
sells, right?
It
There's
does.
something that you need to do though in order to be famous, is you do have to make people fall in love with you. But this can either be make them fall in love with you like because they want to like have sex with you, or because they want to be you, or because they want to be your best friend. So in Hollywood, what we saw first off is that we see these men picking, let's pick the sexy thing because we know that
Mhm.
that will sell. And let's also pick kind of the most basic. Now, because of social media, we've really like flipped who gets power and who gets a platform on its head, because you get to self-select and say, and like raise your hand and be like, I want to be one of those people. And so
Mhm.
that's where I think we see, I think, like, for example, and obviously she's kind of gone through the Hollywood machine, but let's use like Tate McRae, for example. She's
Mhm.
still, like, I would say between those three, like either wanting to be her, date her, or be her best friend, she definitely relies the most on sex appeal. But for the most part, like now we're seeing all these creators who, like, I would say you're someone that people probably really want to be your best friend and want to be you. And like obviously we all have all three of these. I'm not saying that people
Yeah.
don't want to have sex with you, but
Oh,
like
no,
those aren't
not at all. No, but I
that's
mean, I
not the
do
one
get the
that you're
best
like,
friend thing a lot. Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's pretty cool actually, like, to see that. I think as a creator, it's cool to be someone who, like, shares things and it just be one side of, like, okay, they're on the receiving end, but to actually have people in my world who, like, will kind of be a soundboard for me at points. Like, I had a really dark period of winter of last year, and it was the first time that I was, like, at a breaking point, and, like, I've had some breaking points, but this was, like, the breaking point where people are like, "Yo, girl, are you good? Like, we are concerned for you." And the outpouring of, like, support that I had from my community, showing up, like, friends who were in my life for forever, who were doing better as friends than the people who were actually in my life at the time,
yep.
who were sending me, like, money for coffees and Venmos here and giving me calls and, like, send me words of affirmation, like, whatever it was. I was just like, this is wild that I've cultivated a community, though, on the, I would say, relatively smaller. I'm not like a millions and millions of followers type of person. This cultivated audience that I have, like, rose to the ranks to come to my kind of saving grace, if like, to help save me in this moment of need. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, maybe I don't talk to them. They're there acting as friends for
Yes.
me, even though I'm the one who's doing all the talking, sort of
Well,
thing. So it's
yeah. Well,
interesting.
and that's like, okay, so also with like creating this, so you think about like that's like what's a parasocial relationship. So like if your audience doesn't know what that means, it's the audience that a fan has with their, or with that a star has with their fans. So it is actually a one side, it's mutually beneficial, but the celebrity doesn't even know who the person is, but the
Yeah.
person feels like they are actually good friends with them. And so they show up as if they were actually friends with them. So it can be a very symbiotic and healthy relationship. And of course, like, for me, my best friends, like one of them live in LA and the others live all over the country. So like so it's like my most commonly like connected to quote unquote friends are my followers, right? And it is like
Yeah.
a mutually beneficial thing. But I think part of that also, like, and the reason that you were able to create that is because you did show up authentically during a rough period, right? And you like continued to be yourself and to give and to let people see you in a really human and really normal way. And that's like what I like to say is it's kind of like the same as like it's replaced a mom and pa shop. So what I mean by that is like when I used to live in Manhattan, there was this framing gallery that I would go to whenever I had a piece of art. And the first time that I went, I just like met the guy and we end up talking about how he's trying to keep his store open during COVID and he actually inherited it from his dad and he's trying to pay for his son to go through college, whatever. So now I know him. Now I care about him. I don't just care about his product. I'm like, yes, I'm going to go there every time I need, something framed, but I also am going to go to him just to say hi, to check in on his family, things like that. And that's the relationship that we have access to creating using the internet, is
Hmm.
actually like instead of having a mom and pop shop, like people, again, they feel like they know you, they're connected to you. So they do want to be part of you. They want to be part of what you're doing, and they want to send customers your way and they want to be your customers. So I don't think I fully answered your question, but I would say the difference
That's
between
okay. This is a good rabbit
fame,
hole. I'm glad.
okay, the difference between fame and celebrity. So I would say fame is just that resource, which again, you can create that just by like, if you show up and start fear mongering online and like only talking about like crazy, like, that's why like and like no one can can help themselves, but like going down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories or things like that,
Hmm.
or like why the news goes so viral. However, a celebrity is someone who is celebrated, but it's also someone who has this magnetism, who is creating the resource of fame from a really generative place. So this would be the people who, and I would also say, like, not all celebrities are famous and not all famous people are celebrities. So I don't know if you've ever been somewhere in like, I don't know, in the corporate world or whatever, where someone walks in and you are just like drawn and like magnetized to them. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have a huge platform. It means that
Yeah.
they embody this energy, they embody this identity of being the person who, gets results, who changes the world, who uplifts other people, who makes the world a better place. That's what I would say like a celebrity is. And that's
Hmm.
totally accessible for all of us.
I think one of the things that is super interesting is like, is people always say, oh, being famous and being a celebrity are the same thing, but you're saying basically it's not, right? You can be one or
Hmm.
the other or have both at the same time, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
And even
cool.
like we could think about like celebrity is also about, having some meaning behind your name, right? For example, like if you want to get into like, I'm working right now to get into this. One of my best friends is making his Broadway debut. And so tickets are not on sale. And so I'm like working, we'll see how this goes, but to get in touch with a publicist to say, hey, my name means something that it would actually benefit you to have me there. Right. And like, the exchange would be my influence, my content, like things like that. So that is celebrity and that is also fame. But like, if we think about like, I actually have no idea what Cindy Crawford is up to right now. But from what I can tell, she's not really in the public eye right now. So it's not that she actually has a lot of fame, a lot of attention on her right now, but her name means something. And my guess
Yeah.
is she could get into those parties, right? She could get into those red carpet nights, those like opening nights. So it's really about like being able to, and this is where like, if TikTok does get banned, which I don't actually think it will, just because I feel like it never does.
There's
Some
too much
loophole.
in the game, like economically for Americans and
Exactly.
the government. Like it's, we'll see what happens. They might have new
They'll have to
regulations and
change
stuff,
it.
but
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And if that happened, people are going to go follow you because people care about you if you've like done the work, right, to build those parasocial relationships. So that's the thing. It's like Mr. Beast, also, like, the most successful YouTuber. He is breaking all of the rules of TikTok. Like, he doesn't actually follow any of the rules of engagement, but because people care about him, they don't really care. And so his videos already always go viral no matter what platform he's on. So it's really about
Mhm.
building that resource of that parasocial relationship, having that celebrity energy so that people care about you and know your name and want to be a part of whatever you're a part of.
I'm glad that you brought up the difference between the celebrity and fame too, and like kind of breaking down again. The example of Cindy Crawford is a great example because there's like, we see it all the time, right? The Kardashians are always relevant. They're always doing something. They got their PR team on stuff, stirring up some drama or whatever to stay relevant, to stay famous. But even if they had a quiet period, I'm sure their name would obviously still mean something. But as us as creators, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had moments of like, a lot of eyes on me of like the media coverage and this and that, and every video is going viral. And then moments of like deep quietness or like unsure of what I'm doing or what I'm talking about, or like the magnetism is still there, but I don't quite have the same kind of tunnel vision sort of, okay, this is what we're doing and this is bang, 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 bang. So, and also I would say for a lot of people too, especially with TikTok being such a viral focused sort of platform and it doing crazy things, like how can someone like stay, I don't want to say stay relevant because, right, again, energetically, some things change, but like, how do you, there are people who become like the one hit wonder, right? Their one
Hmm.
video goes viral and they think, this is it. This is finally, my business is going to do well. I'm going to figure it all out. And then they never have another viral video or they don't understand what their angle is or like, and they go back to the drawing board. Like anything you could touch on regarding that in terms of like
Yep.
tips or insight, or I'm sure you've got a knowledge of what to talk about
Yep.
for that. But
Yeah, it's super common. So, first off, just I want us to like remember fame is a video game. So, there's going to be new levels of it. I've worked with people like I think, I've worked with red carpet celebrities, but I think just in terms of like ease of, this assessment, I think Instagram is or TikTok, like having a following is the easiest. So, the exact same thing. Okay. let me try again. This question makes me so excited. So,
I'll cut. I'll cut.
you're good. So I want you to like imagine our brains have kind of this like internal thermostat for how much fame we feel comfortable receiving and how much attention we feel comfortable receiving. So there's basically like a thermostat. If it gets too hot, then the air is going to kick on. If it gets too cold, then the heat's going to kick on. The reason is that it preserves energy and it keeps us at this like equilibrium temperature, because if you're constantly going from
Huh.
54 degrees all the way to 85 degrees, then your air conditioner, your heat is going to constantly just be running and running and running. So our brains do the exact same thing. So there will be, and this is something that like where a lot of creators plateau, we all have this subconscious number of what we feel safe being perceived as. So like, and what's
Mhm.
interesting is, I've worked with clients who are just starting out all of the way to like already having millions of followers. And the exact same thing is happening. So the only difference is the people who are just starting out, the number that they feel safe being perceived by is like 200 people. Whereas the people with millions of followers, they're at like millions and they're like,
Mhm.
now I'm tapped out. So what ends up happening, and this is something that's like super common, is people who it's like, they can't ever pass the 10K mark, or they keep getting to 50K and then they like start over, or they get freaked out and then they shut down their account, or they start self-sabotaging, right? That's when you change your niche. That's when you quit doing what's working. This is just your brain trying to keep you safe, because even though your soul might want to grow, your brain doesn't perceive that it is safe for you to have more eyes on you. So no matter where you're at, there is some sort of like upper limit that is keeping you stuck. And so the work is always just going to be, again, going back into that video game and figuring out like what is the energetic block here. One of the best compliments I've ever received, someone was just like, "You're so good at manifesting." And I was like, "I know, because I know the process of like, oh, you want something, go find the subconscious block for it and remove the block, and then you're going to receive it." So it really does come down to like creating that safety in your body by releasing those subconscious blocks so that you can receive more love, more fame, more success.
Now, is this some of the things you teach in your mentorship program? And also, like, what is your favorite modality for hacking the subconscious? Because I'm always curious. Some people are like sworn to ayahuasca. Some people are like, nah, I'm good with like a solid book. Like, do you have like a favorite go to thing or?
Yeah, so that is literally like my bread and butter as a coach, is that I have my own process for it. So basically what I do is it's like a 6-step process. So and this is, I have like a course that people can learn this and do it themselves, or I do have a 6-month mentorship. Their results are guaranteed. They go through the process with me and we make sure that you know how to implement it, not only for your current goal, but then we literally, again, we're rewiring your brain so you get used to creating results in this way, so that then every time you're blocked, you're like, let me come back to this. So there are, though, like very specific steps that we do. So the first thing, though, is like really learning how, like, this is what I call like going all in, right? So just, I don't know if you've noticed, but like for a lot of celebrities, it's like, it just seems like there are people that things just like work out for. And
Yeah.
that does come down to an identity shift. So the first thing is we shift that identity. And then the second thing, like a celebrity is someone who is celebrated. So in the second step, you become the person who is celebrated both internally and externally. And then that's when we get into that subconscious rewiring. So I have my own modality for this, which is where I teach my clients how to pick apart their brain and see which thoughts are the subconscious thoughts. But this is essentially the first thing, like basically what you need to do is get really, really clear on what those patterns are and how they're, and like get that awareness so that you can, it's like cleaning up the trash a little bit and being like, "Ooh, what are
Yeah.
these things?" And then we move into that like somatic safety. So in the like steps like 4 and 5, that's when you actually create that safety in your body. So it's not like, I always say, it's like you can't just gaslight yourself into fame. You have to actually feel it and you have to actually embody it, because
Yeah.
our energy is like a body odor. And like sometimes if we're stinky after a workout, it's like we don't smell it on ourselves, but other people do.
For sure.
Right. And so it's about creating that safety. So in this, I do use EFT. I use some somatic work. I use like hypnosis. I also teach clients my own like little tool that's like honestly the one most of them use. It's called an alien exercise, but basically
I love that.
it's about like creating that like actual safety in your body. And then
Mhm.
we move into that like receiving mode. So once you like move through this process, then you're naturally just going to, it's like, I think one of the misconceptions people like, I need to go out and do things. And it's like, no, you just need to allow them to come to you, right? Like if you
Yep.
think about
Mhm.
even in dating, if you were like thinking about it as hunting, I mean, I do think maybe there are people that is their vibe, but with fame, again, you want people to fall in love with you. And so you want to attract them to you. And so a lot of that is just allowing. So yeah, I do all of the things. I love hypnosis. I am just like such a believer in my own processes because they have worked and they're also cyclical. And I've seen them work for clients who are just starting and also who are like, award-winning like red carpet celebrities. So that's kind of like, I guess what it is in a nutshell.
I was curious because everyone has their own form of doing things, but it is interesting how so many people, we all kind of come back to very similar sort of experiences, right? Moving things through your body, processing emotions, like in whatever shape or form you need to do that, whether it's something as simple as cold plunge or like literally going into
Yeah.
the desert or not the desert, the jungle and drinking some like medicine herb or whatever. Like it
Yeah.
is what it is that you're extreme. Yeah, take it as with a grain of salt, but I also love the fact that you mentioned that you don't have to chase things necessarily or like not that
Hmm.
you don't have to do a lot of work, right? The it's so uncomfortable picking apart your internal shit. Like it really is so
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And like if you want to do that, like being a creator is like the best way to do that. Like you will have to face your stuff more than you ever would by being in this industry or being a business owner than you like for any other thing, in my opinion.
Oh,
But
100%.
like, it is interesting though, because when my, like, first peak happened, I didn't have the capacity to hold it, and so I
Yep.
self-sabotaged and threw the whole thing away and kinda started from scratch, and since then, it's been a lot of, like, question marks, and, like, the great thing though is now I get to choose versus just blindly picking what's working or what other people are telling me to do versus choosing the shots and making it go as I want it to be. But the magnetic aspect is super cool too because you're like, I've never once pitched a brand. All of my brand deals had I have I ever done them, they flew into my inbox or clients came
Yep.
into my inbox or like it's very sure you have to sell something or like shit you have to post online if you want to be seen. That's your
Hmm.
aspect of work, quote unquote. But like it should be easy if you're in alignment. Again, easy
Exactly.
within quotations. Everything's relative, but
Right. Well, and it's also like, I mean, I think the hardest thing is that like risk tolerance is getting into that alignment, is looking at yourself. Like so many people are unwilling to do that. And if you do that work, like I think that's actually the hardest work. And so then that's like to me, looking at my own shit, working through it, that's harder than like a 16-hour workday on my feet. Right. And I say that having done both. So it's like pick your poison, but one of them will create the result of things coming to you instead of having to like constantly grind it out and like make shit happen.
yeah. One question I did have that I just was talking to someone yesterday. We hadn't really talked about this, but I think it might be something you can touch on. Is do you think that the model of influencers is dead? Like that traditional, hey, we're just gonna like sell stuff and like, or do you think that it's not that it's dead, but it's evolving so rapidly because so many people are taking it on? Like, what's your thoughts on the whole on like that? If that even falls
Yeah.
into the category of celebrity and like, I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure.
So there is, I forget the exact number, but I did just see the statistic where it's something crazy like 72% of commerce sales are still all happening through influencers. So
Hmm.
because of that, I don't think from the corporate side it's going to go anywhere. But what I do see from an influencer perspective is the influencers who have built an audience just around products, that's going to be dead. And you're going to have to, and there are the people who our favorite influencers who have been around the block since 2012 or whatever, obviously they can what ends up happening. So this is the trajectory and this is the same too, I think, in the past, but what I typically see is you have to kind of create like a cult-like following, and that's where
Hmm.
you need to be really specific and really authentic. And then once you get famous enough, then you'll kind of have like a tidal wave of fans. And it's kind of that whole idea. I don't know if you've ever been having a conversation with someone when they bring up a celebrity and you don't know who they are, but by the way that that person talks about it, you know that it's a person of influence. And so
Yep.
that just their name again kind of means something. So, but what a lot of people do when they're starting is they jump to that point where they don't like they think because they're seeing the big names not being specific, then they're like, "Oh, I just need to sell products." But essentially you're kind of like skipping all the steps of building a really loyal fan base. So what I think is I don't think it's actually going to change that much other than I think the demand for authenticity is going to be a lot more stringent. And I don't think you can but I also, I mean, for in terms of TikTok, like I just turned 32, so I feel like I'm older in terms of that world. And even I like wanted to try being an influencer in 2012, but I was lacking that authenticity. And so it never worked for me. Where I was just trying to copy what like the big names were doing instead of being
Hmm.
authentic to who I was. So I don't know that it's actually changing or if that's maybe like just something that's kind of always been the case and now it's highlighted even more because I think, with audiences especially, like you want to build an audience of young people because they are
And they
in the
grow with
zeitgeist
you.
and they grow with you. Yeah. And Gen Z and younger, they can sniff out bullshit. Like they
Oh, for
know
sure.
if you're just like if you're phoning it in. And so I think that's where like the demand to be really authentic will be even more of a tool than it has been in the past.
Yeah. I like that though, because I do think I've been influenced to buy things or participate in things that have changed my life, much like me picking up my phone and downloading TikTok. But like, it's also we don't necessarily want to be sold everything, and there's sometimes a bad thing if all you're known as the person who's selling something versus like, oh, I love this individual for who they are. And also, it's the difference between like going viral and like doing something for the long term, right? Actually playing the long game of like, no, I don't want this to be a 2-year thing where I just make a ton of money and get out. I want to do this for like my entire life because I have this light and this expression that needs to come out in some way, shape, or form. And right now, this is the pathway to do it.
Yes. And it's interesting too because I do think that there were a couple people who maybe picked up in the early days of TikTok and did build and got to the place that they were a successful influencer. And now they're the people that are like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I'm leaving. And it's like, yeah, because you never actually started it from a place of authenticity. You started it from a place of peddling products and wanting to quit a job that you didn't like. And so but if that was your end goal, then it's never going to be sustainable. And there's easier ways to do it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I just figured I'd bring it up because it's everything that all these things are hot topics right now with the TikTok ban and things changing in the economy and like whatever. But I wonder, did we miss anything? Is there anything like last little bits of information or something you wanted to share that we hadn't gotten to specifically around fame, celebrity energy, your program, things that you're doing, anything like that?
Not really. I mean, you're such a good interviewer. You're so
Oh,
thorough.
thank you.
So, no, I feel pretty complete. I love talking about this stuff and I loved your questions. I love chatting with you about it. I think you have a great insight as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I'm like kind of I would say in your demographic of someone who I finally came to the realization of like, okay, girl, like you can still be a humble, good, genuine person and want to cultivate the resources of fame for the
Yes.
betterment of humanity. Like you can have this. It's okay. You
Yeah.
don't have to feel gross about it. So now I'm like, okay, we're gonna call more people into your world then to support or further prove that this is the right pathway or give you the tools or like the setup or like whatever it is to make it happen. So it was
A
just
hundred
the
percent.
timing, like I said, was perfect of us connecting. But one thing I did want to do, and I do with every single episode, is just one final question, which is if you could give advice to your younger self, what would that be? And that could be, like young Whitney, as in the still in the Mormon church. It could be Whitney a year ago. Like, what would you give to your younger self?
That's such a good question. I honestly think I would just tell her, like, you're not wrong. Like, I think that that's, something that we see from anyone who comes from any type of marginalized background. But for me, also, just like as a queer person wanting to be an artist, like there were so many ways that I just didn't feel like I fit in, or, I wasn't creating the success that I wanted as an actor, or, I was just kept hitting walls. And I just, in my brain, though, I was like, but I feel like there's something more for me. Like it feels like there's supposed to be something else. And I just would be like I'm grateful because what I did actually do was keep going and keep betting on this, but I would love to like be able to tell that girl like, "Hey, like you're right. You are not wrong about this and like all your dreams are coming true." So, like keep
Like
it
you'll
up kind of
become
thing.
the person that you've always wanted to be, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just it might take a little bit
exactly.
more time. That's all for the
Yeah,
right reasons, of
exactly.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, and take more time, but also be exactly what you wanted instead of like, because again, when I was, 12 and I wanted to be an actress, it's like I wanted to be a puppet for someone else. And I didn't realize that I actually wanted to have a voice. And so, yeah, I think that's what I tell her.
Yeah. Thank God for the internet, right?
Thank God.
To allow you to do that. But this has been so great. I've had so much value in talking to you. I know my audience is going to be gushing about you as well. For anyone listening, you can look at the show notes where all of Whitney's information is. We'll have this up on YouTube. You can watch it and see us talking live, which is really fun. Yeah. Anything else you want to mention before we kind of wrap this up, or all good?
I think
Anything more? Or?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.